Good afternoon, evening. It's already evening. Let someone help you to find the access to more inner connection with your own fundamental reality. In other words, your own fundamental reality is also something that exists in that pie-shaped triangular part of the Trinity. So you have God, you have you, and you have your reality. But your reality, you see, expands exponentially when you look into it, right? I can see that. And so it becomes very, very vast. And it will last for the duration, because the duration is the inspiration of the Trinity, because the Trinity is something that is fundamentally solid, and it's not going to desert you. It's going to be there for you. And so if you step up to the door and you go through the door into reality, you see that there is so much activity that it surprises you. How could there be all this activity in this pie-shaped part of my own access to the Trinity? So if you are a part of God and God is a part of you, and both of you exist in reality, and reality exists in you, then there's something I need to say to you. And what I need to say to you is that there is never anything outside of you, but you are always the one that is inside of your reality. And so you have to take your place inside of your reality in order to experience it, because it is the fundamental part of you and God and reality that holds it all together, you see. So God and you walk hand in hand, you might say, but the reality is where you play. And so today I want to talk about that. This is Bernhard Riemann, and I am a little bit rueful today because I think of all the times that I wanted to play a part in reality that would conform to the trust on mathematical theory, you see. And I did, of course. I had to, because we all do. However, I never had anyone that I could talk to about it, as I can talk to you, because others could not comprehend the Trinity. And because they could not comprehend the Trinity, they could not comprehend infinity. And therefore, they might play with the numbers, and they might use them to do this and that in their reality, which was also in my reality, because it had to be part of my reality if I was aware of it, right? Exactly. And so it's all part of my reality. It's part of your reality now because we're talking about it, but you already knew it anyway because you already observed it, right? That is true. I did already observe it. And so I can talk to you about it and you can talk to me about it. And we can both see that the mathematics is the language of reality. And so when I say to you that there is a God factor that will give you a surprise, you understand that. And you say, of course there is, because if there was not a God factor that is able to change everything in a moment, then there would be a mechanical universe. And all you had to do was say, well, if I push this button today, then this will happen and that will happen and the other will happen. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way because there are those odd numbers, you see, that are odder than the ones that can only divided by themselves and themselves, you see, by themselves and the number one, you see. Sorry about that. My fault. It's okay, Steph. And so these odd numbers are the ones that don't conform to the pattern. So why don't they conform to the pattern, you ask? Because they are the outliers. They are the outliers because they are liars, you see? And they lie outside of the trust on the mechanical universe. They're placeholders. They're placeholders for the unknown. And the unknown is, again, a pie-shaped reality that will expand to infinity, right? Yes, I can see that. And so there is a lot of options today because we can play in a different way and we can trust that God has it in hand because God is holding all the cards in his hand. And God can say, I've got all the cards in my hand and I have these cards that are wild, you see. They're the wild cards. And I can play the wild cards in order to cover the distance between the other cards in my hand, you see? Does this make sense to you? It makes perfect sense to me, Mr. Riemann. Thank you. And if anyone were listening to this, they would say it makes perfect sense to you because I am a part of you. However, that's not exactly true. It makes perfect sense to you because you and I think alike, because we are able to see a reality that escapes the ken of most people. Not everybody. There are some who understand what I say today, that mathematics is the language of reality, and you understand that very well, because you understand that it is a language, and you have often spoken of it that way, that it is the language of patterns. That mathematics is the language of patterns, and patterns are what inform reality. Because you have a pattern for the human body, you have a pattern for this, and you have a pattern for that. There's a wind pattern and a gravitational pattern, etc., etc., etc. And these patterns are defined mathematically. However, they are also inclined to produce the experiences of the patterns in an infinite variety of forms, right? Yes. And so those forms are the dorms, you might say, in which you lay your head. And you say, well, this is where I put my bed because I trust on this form today. I trust on the human body today. I trust on the tree. that produces the nuts that I eat. I trust on the vegetables that will grow from this little seed, you see. So you trust on the form to keep you safe in the cradle of creativity, right? Yes, I see that. So now I want to talk to you about the way that I want to play. I want to help you to overcome the dastardly effort to undermine reality by suggesting that it is capable of being reduced to a mathematical formula, which is ridiculous because every mathematical formula depends on a certain result that brings certainty to the observer because they can see the proof. You see, they can see the proof. They can build 1,000 bridges from the plants, you see. But what they can't do is they can't foresee the act of God that will say, this bridge must go away. This bridge must go away because I need to let the water play in its own way. And when God plays his wild card, you see, the wild card always has to be a representation of one of the other numbers, right? Yes. The wild card always, you have to say this wild card is a jack or a two or whatever it is you want, a two of hearts, whatever. Yes. So you have to call it. So at the moment you play it, you call it. And that is what God does do. God plays his card and then it is called. And so it might be that a hurricane comes along and causes a flood that wipes out the bridge, you see, because God played his wild card and he called it a flood. And the hurricane had to happen in order for there to be a flood because he is playing his hand in order to honor the patterns that are established already for the recognition of man, that man will understand the patterns. And so if that bridge suddenly just went poof and disappeared, man would be frightened, you see, and they would say, what happened today? What happened today? And they would feel very, very insecure. They would feel frightened and they would be looking around them for a culprit, you see. They would say, is it the aliens come and vaporize that bridge? Or what happened to it? And they would try and find some rhyme or reason for the season. When in reality, God will say, I vaporized that bridge today, but I'm going to call it a flood because I have to call my wild card, you see? And so there is always this uncertainty in the world. And that is the surprise that comes to you that changes the patterns. It's no longer a mechanical reality. However, it will seem to be a mechanical reality because of the fact that you call the card. So this is a violation of the rule of certainty in the world you see. And yet it can only be perceived by those who understand the God factor, you see. And this is represented in the mathematical formulations as the numbers that don't fit the pattern. They just don't fit the pattern. No matter how hard you try to figure out the pattern, they won't succumb to the intentions of the one who seeks to put it all together to see. And you understand this, right? I do understand it. But sometimes you don't call it. I mean, I don't know. Did Jesus walk on water? Maybe. And people can't figure it out. So for those of us who walked on hot coals, across whatever it was, 30 feet of hot coals or whatever, without any issue, the people that I talked to about it tried to find some explanation for it. You put something on your feet, special. You do something, coat your feet, you do this, you do that. Maybe you're hypnotized, whatever, because we know people that are hypnotized can do weird things. So they are looking for an explanation for it. They got to put it into the patterns that they already accept. That when you step on a hot coal, you're going to burn your foot. And you better not walk across your campfire. So these are the patterns that they understand. But we also hear about these incidents that are out of patterns, like Jesus walking on water, or somebody lifting it, suddenly having the strength to lift a car to free a child that's pinched under it, or jump over a fence that they could never jump over normally in order to reach somebody or get away from something. Uh, they're explained as extra adrenaline or whatever. But in reality, that would be that wild card, and they just call it, right? Yes, those are wild cards. And they baffle humanity until they get upon a explanation for them. And they say, well, this is my explanation for that. This is my explanation for that. And so when you walked on hot coals, you said, well, my explanation for this is belief. That what we believe will come true because we speak our truth and God hears it and God says, okay, let's play that way, honey. Let's play that way. And so today you say, God, I need a way to accomplish everything you asked me to do. So how am I going to do that when I'm 74? And I don't have that many years more to do all this. And so you say, God, can you play a wild card, please? Can you play a wild card that will break the patterns, you see? And so suppose that God does break the pattern and he says, well, Stephanie, I have a lot of work for you to do and you have a lot of experience that I can use. And so I'm going to play that wild card for you and I'm going to let you live to 142 in good health. So you can help me to get the new community established and the new nation under God will thrive because you'll be there to supervise it through the beginning phases. And you say, okay, God, I'm good with that because I know where it's at. That if I can get away from the people who believe a certain way, then I can open myself up to you playing a wild card today. And so you trust on that, right? It's true, Mr. Riemann. It's true that I do trust on that. I trust on the wild card being played periodically for one reason or another. Even those people who see an angel who stops them and says, hey, you can't go that way, that's a wild card for them because it's out of the patterns. And then the person disappears. Yes. So they recognize a wild card and they say, somebody played a wild card today because it shouldn't have been that way. But they whipped out that card and said, this is going to be a man who's going to warn you not to go that way. And so you trust that there's a man that tells you not to go that way and you don't go that way. And then afterwards you say, what happened to that guy? He went away suddenly. How strange that was. How strange. It doesn't fit the normal patterns that somebody would just step out of the darkness and say, don't go that way. Don't go that way. You will regret it if you go that way. And so they say God played a wild card because it's not a mechanical universe. There's something more going on here. And others will listen to them and they will say, oh, you foolish person. You just weren't paying attention. It was just some man who wanted a ride or something and he wanted you to go a different way and give him a ride, but then you drove off and he never got a ride or whatever. They would have some mechanical explanation for it that fit the patterns, right? Yes, I would say that most would. However, there are some who trust that God has a hand in reality and he can play the wild card, you see? And sometimes God will play a wild card and it will become so trustworthy for people to see that it could be a reality that they began to trust on it. You see, they began to trust that in the nature of reality, there's been a major change. But it all has to fit together, you see. It all has to fit together, right? Yes. In some way, it has to fit together. Whether you say it's because of the beliefs that you give your beliefs to God and God energizes them or whatever, that you ask God for help. I remember there was this woman once who told me a story, and I've heard other stories like this and had a few of my own, but she was in a building that had caught on fire. She was looking at some cabinets. It was a fire in a cabinet shop with all the dust and fumes and stuff. And so it just, boom, went up in flames. And she was there looking at some cabinets and she tried to get out a back door. And because of the air differential between the inner and the outer, she could not get the door open. And she pulled and couldn't get it open. And finally she said, in the name of God, or something like that, or in the name of Jesus, let this door open. And then she could pull it open. And she went through the door. So a lot of people trust on their ability to call on God or Jesus or angels in order to save them in certain circumstances. So that's a wild card. Yes, that's a wild card, and others might come up with an explanation for it. And some would say, well, wild cards are a reality. However, those who say that wild cards are a reality don't really understand the mathematics of it all, do they? Not the ones that I have met. There may be some, but not the ones that I met. Right. And that is part of the difference between the right and the left. Because the right generally trust on the wild cards and the left do not. And so you have that disparity, right? Yes, I've noticed that. The right do trust that God can intervene, and the left, as a rule, do not. And we're talking politically. Yes. Okay. So, yet the left pride themselves on trusting on the value of mathematics and science, right? And yet they don't trust on the wild card. They don't trust on the anomaly. No, not in my experience generally. There is this differential between people. And the right trust on the anomaly, they trust on the miracle, they trust on the power of God to play a wild card. However, they don't trust on the science. And they don't trust on the other numbers, you see, so they don't trust the mathematics. And that would allow there to be some stability in the life that we lead and some assurance. They feel very insecure in their belief structure and they get angry and frustrated because they think that others think that they are ignorant, you see. Whereas for you accept the wild card but you also accept the stability of the numbers, you see, and you understand that the mathematics can contain a surprise, and it's like a wedge, right? Yes, I see the way you're showing it to me, a pie shape with a wedge. So if you stand at the entrance to that wild card, it can be anything because it's a wild card. Yes. So the moment that you step into that, the point of that wedge shape, you are looking out at the somewhat triangular shape of the pie piece that is the wild card, and therefore it can take any form in order to conform to the hand that is God needs to play, right? Right. And why does God need to play that? Because God always wishes to help his children to come back to the Trinity, to understand that there can be the surprises, but there can also be the stability. And there can also be the security of the patterns, you see. Right, right, I understand that. So we come to the third option again, is what you're telling me. Yes, third option, which isn't that hard to understand. That a young child can understand that if they have two puzzle pieces that fit together, they will fit together in a certain shape, you see, and that shape is the reality of the third option. So they might have two puzzle pieces that you put them together and they form a giraffe. And they say, well, here's a giraffe today, but I also have two pieces. And some people might say, well, here's a brain today, but I have a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. Here's a body today, but I have a right hand and a left hand. And they need to play together in order to form a reality. And so what happens is that until 1 and 2 can play together, they won't create 3. And they won't be a trinity. And so, as you say, the singularity and the duality are the two legs of the stool, and the trinity is a three-legged stool. And everyone knows that a three-legged stool is more stable than a one-legged stool or a two-legged stool, right? Right. People understand that instinctively. They do understand that instinctively. You might say, because it's very simple to learn it in practice. If one of the legs on your stool collapses, you will collapse too. So it's pretty easy for them to understand that a tricycle is more stable than a bicycle. This doesn't mean that the bicycle is not capable of being understood as a trinity because it has two wheels, but it also has someone who balances on those two wheels, you see, in order to get a ride to the other side of the block, you see. So now why I'm talking to you about all of this is because I want you to help others to see that the Trinity is the fundamental experience of reality. And so you understand the Trinity. So you don't have a problem talking to me and saying, this is part of my experience today. And Mr. Riemann is a wild card that God did play in order to fill in the gap, you see, because he's come to me many times to talk about something that I enjoy thinking about, but I have nobody to talk with about it because they don't understand the mathematical language of reality. They just understand mathematics, perhaps, or they understand a version of reality that says a three-legged stool is better than a two-legged stool. But they don't understand the anomaly. They don't understand the container, you see. They don't understand that what contains all of creation is the singularity that contains the two sides of itself, and therefore it is a trinity. The brain is a trinity because it is one that is made up of two halves, you see. And if you separate the two halves, then you don't have a whole brain, you see. This is only one of many, many, many examples that we can give to explain the Trinity. There are many. There are so many. Because if you understand the value of 3, then you'll understand a lot about mathematical theory. And so, in the synchronicity of time, God has played his hand over and over again in order to direct your attention back to the reality of you, God, and your own story, because that's your reality, of course. It's what you hear, what you see, what you feel, all of that, right? Right? And when the stories align with each other, when you can talk to somebody and they say, well, I understand what you say. Here's what I have to say. And you say, well, I understand that. It all makes sense to me. It's in alignment. And therefore, there is a consistency in the synergy of the elements inside the anomaly, right? Right. Because I guess my story would be an anomaly, and every story would be an anomaly, right? Yes. However, they can have a correlation that is an inflation of the value of each, right? Yeah. And so let's talk about this some more, but I want you to please share this dialogue with others, you see, because there's a lot of people who are trying to figure it out and they just can't figure it out. And that is the value of the proof, you see. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And so, although all of this mathematical talk is too complex for you to unravel it, you understand the basic principles better than some people who have studied the numbers, all their lives, you see. You understand it because you have the experience and you have the ability to speak the language in a way that will say this is the reality. The reality is the mathematics, you see. This is the nature of God energy. And so let us bestow this gift upon humanity, whether they understand that it is a gift or not. Let them hear from two people who are very clear about their experience and how they have put it together, you see, to arrive at a similar understanding of the nature of the numbers and the reality that they express. Okay. It's true that I do understand all of these ideas and concepts of mathematics. And you helped me too with the odd number thing, going through all those calculations to see the God factor. So you did help me with that too. And I appreciate that. You are welcome. And we will talk more because I like to talk about it. I like to think about it. And I like to have someone share with me what I see. I like it too. I like it a lot. And so I'm looking forward to talking about it more. Me too. I will give you credit where credit is due because the credit that comes to you is the trust on a credit that will come to you in the form of a wild card, you see, because God is here and God has the game in hand and he can play a wild card when it suits the hand, you see. So let's just be trusting on the world we see and watching every bit of it to see how much of it fits the patterns, you see. Yeah, I like doing that too. Okay, thank you, Mr. Riemann. Talk to you again soon. You too, my dear. You too.